merging, not only with the biological mother, because we know now in the womb that, that the fetus is able to feel like he or she is in heaven because it's in this perfect environment, but also a merging with the ancient primordial mother as well in this undifferentiated state. So that's kind of how I look at addictions, in a way as an Ouroboros incest, a desire not to suffer, not to feel any pain, just feel pleasure. And that's what is happening there. But rather, we, like the ancients, would rather invoke the Great Mother by using symbols, metaphors, allegories, mythological treatments, rather than talk about these general abstractions such as the abyss, the unmanifest, the sea of chaos, etc. So as I proceed, I'd like to talk about some of these symbols of the Dark Goddess, both as a psychic gestalt, in other words, a tool of personal reflection or development, and more importantly, as a means of liberation and release from the dark times of this counterfeit creation. Okay. Now, the name of before I go on to the symbols, the name of the lecture is Dark Times Require a Dark Goddess. And once again, I think you all know that we're living in dark times, and I think we're all tired of it and ready to kick it to the curb, and just really, it's too much now. Okay, hopefully some of you heard me refer to the Ouroboros as this womb tomb, this cosmic womb tomb. Some of the symbols that we see in the mythology are caves, which symbolize the underworld or the inner world. We see tombs, which obviously symbolize death. There's a symbol of the yoni, which is the birth passage, the vagina. It's also symbolizing rebirth. And then there's sarcophagus, which when you break down that word, it means sacred eating, which I think is kind of interesting, and then I don't want to go off on a tangent on that, but that's very interesting. Sacred eating. All words, these words, cave, tomb, yoni, sarcophagus, foreshadow the hidden chthonic and death aspect of the primordial Great Mother. So already in the consciousness, there is the need to use symbols and myths to be able to relate to this prima materia. Now, I think you can look at these goddesses here who are, anthropomorphized, more or less, and you see that, they're feminine, that they're female, and I think you can relate to this woman, Medusa, Kali, Sekhmet, and Lilith, more than you can to just some vague concept of the void, That's cool too, but it's a little bit easier to relate to this when it's anthropomorphized. Okay. So from what we could tell that, in ancient times, these primordial times, that birth was the domain of the feminine. Okay, they saw the baby coming out of the woman, not the man. Death, too, was the domain of the feminine. And it is this birth and death and rebirth aspect, the cyclical aspect, the waxing and waning, that the mythology helps us to understand. Okay. Caves, mountains, rock formations, star constellations. To open a parenthesis here, the Milky Way galaxy is said to be what? The Newt, the breast milk from Newt coming. And the celestial serpent dragon passed through the constellation of Taurus, and it was at this time that the reverence of the holy cow heifer, Hathor, the golden calf, and in India, Krishna and the cowgirls appeared. So, in other words, people are looking at the earth, the Mother Earth, and looking at the sky and kind of making some connections here. And the Semites had the bull god El. This is when the serpent, the Ouroboros serpent is passing through the constellation of Taurus. In Crete, there was the bull god Minos. In Egypt, there was Apis. And then the horns of the bull were seen to reflect the lunar crescent. And by extension, the lunar crescent obviously being an allusion to the blood and the dark moon mysteries of the woman. Okay? Many mountains were said to be the throne of the Great Mother. Certain caves and rock formations were said to represent her vulva. And probably an excellent word, I think she recently died, that talks about how you can go to places on the earth and just see the goddess, is Maria Gimbutas, the gods and goddesses of old Europe. It's pretty much the seminal text on that. Another example of how the earth is female, the Delphic Oracular Shrine, which is now associated with Apollo. Originally, it was a sacred place in Greece ruled over by the serpent python Delphine, coming from the ancient word Delphis, which means womb. Okay? And this is why in Egypt you have the mortal king sitting on Isis on her lap, and this is the throne, and this is the only way, you know the story, this is the only way that he can rule is by virtue of being empowered by the throne of Isis, which is this stuff back here. Okay, all right. Okay, hold on. I'm like really sweating. That's the good thing about being in a hotel, you get free towels, so I'm like really sweating now. Okay, sorry. That's very unladylike, sorry, but I had to do it anyway. Okay, so let's make a segue here. So we're starting out with the Ouroboros, okay, this serpent, self-contained, all-powerful, containing everything, and being self-begetting. It created itself, okay? And the self-begetting one, the Ouroboros, begets a son. And I think Sister Mara did a very beautiful job yesterday of talking how it goes from the queen to the son. Okay? It doesn't go the queen to the door, it goes queen to son. Beautiful. Okay, and this son is actually a son/lover, to be exact. This son was the fecundating principle and the result of the fecundating process. And there are several myths that bear this out. Obviously, in pre-dynastic Hemmitt, there was Set Typhon. There was Zeus, the child Zeus, being suckled by the Great Mother in the form of a goat. Now, some of you who got the handouts yesterday, there's actually a picture of that, which I got from the Zelator book. So you can see that picture of Zeus being suckled. That's the Great Mother and the Son. And then various Mediterranean mythologies, be it Babylonian, Sumerian, you have this mother and son configuration. So not only are these sons born of the mother, they are slain, mourned, and reborn through her as well. Now I'm still here at the Neumann, and I'm going to read a quote. He's actually quoting J.J. Bachofen, his book Myth, Religion, and Mother Right, which is kind of the real powerhouse scholarship on the ancient Great Mother. On page 47, he writes that this, once again, this is Neumann quoting Bachofen, okay, so this is like a secondary source. The mother is earlier than the son. The feminine has priority, while masculine creativity only appears afterwards as a secondary phenomenon. The female, and I'm dropping, the female is primary. The male is only what comes out of her. He is part of the visible but ever-changing created world. He exists only in perishable form. Woman exists from everlasting, self-subsistent, immutable. Okay? Man, evolving, is subject to continual decay. In the realm of the physical, therefore, the masculine principle is of second rank, subordinate to the feminine. Herein lies the prototype and justification of gynocracy. Now, something I didn't say earlier on is my framework, my analytical framework, if you will, is not only am I talking about biological women, I'm really equating the feminine or the Great Mother with black people. Because I don't know about you, but I don't want to alienate any brothers out here because you're part of me. So when I talk about, the masculine and, I'm not talking about the brothers. I'm talking about, this other counterfeit person on the planet right now, okay? All right, so, but that was some, that's a pretty powerful quote there, talking about how the mother is, okay. All right. So according to the son, he is aware of his masculine otherness, but it is not strong enough to cope with her. Remember, she's all powerful. And he succumbs to her and is devoured by her. So all of a sudden now we have the Great Mother becoming this death goddess. Okay? And how does this happen? Well, she has the sun is her lover, but they're actually phallic consorts. And Norman calls it drones serving the queen bee, who are to be killed as soon as they complete their act of fecundation. Now, oh gosh. Okay, once again, this is kind of what this is saying here. You really have to kind of let this sit in for a minute. Is that cycles? You're born, you live, and you're devoured. It's just a cycle. Okay. Okay, the serpent is a symbol of the fertilizing phallus, and that's why the Great Mother is so often connected with snakes, and the most famous being, not famous, but we're most familiar with is the Gorgon Medusa over there. All right. And there's another quote that I want to read from the Neumann, where he talks about these lovers. All lovers of mother goddesses have certain features in common. They are all youths whose beauty and loveliness are as striking as their narcissism. They are delicate blossoms symbolized by the myths as anemones, narcissi, hyacinths, or violets. Okay, let me skip down. Apart from that, they are, in contrast to the heroic figures of mythology, devoid of strength and character, lacking all individuality and initiative. They are, in every sense of the word, obliging boys whose narcissistic self-attraction is obvious. All right. And then he goes on to talk about this cult of phallic fertility. Like the phallic sexual orgy is everywhere typical of the Great Mother. Fertility festivals and rites of spring are sacred to the youthful phallus and its rampant sexuality. Or rather, this would be better formulated the other way around. The phallus of the young god is sacred to the Great Mother, for originally she was not concerned with the youth at all, but with the phallus of which he is the bearer. So, I don't know, I kind of took that to mean that, going back to that original Ouroboros state, this self-contained entity is that, ultimately I don't want to say she, but, well, I do, but this entity is self-sufficient. It's all. That's all it is. Okay. All right. All right. The Great Mother is also a virgin. that is, unrelated, not dependent on any man. And in Sanskrit, the word harlot is actually synonymous with independent woman. Thank you. Harlot. Okay, I have to take a sip. Yeah. So now we have this great mother and a son, and probably a priesthood that is worshiping her. And something, now we're talking about, I don't even know what kind of time we're talking about. These are such ancient times, but we're talking about an evolution or a progression. And these sons and these priests, the priesthood, all of a sudden they develop this negative fascination with the mother. And all of a sudden, after being this great mother, she becomes a sorceress, a witch, a goddess of bloody, orgiastic rituals and festivals, a goddess of war. Okay, so no longer is he, the son, content to kind of just be with the mother. He's getting awareness of self. Now, once again, we're talking about, archetypal energy here too. Okay, so just to kind of reiterate this mother-son configuration. Okay, initially, he's the willing consort of the Great Mother. He had acceptance of his role in the sacredness of life and as part of the mysteries of birth, death, and rebirth. And he becomes sort of a vegetation god, as we see with Osiris and Dionysus and Tammuz, all of those gods. Okay. He is in ecstatic sexual union with the Great Mother. He or her, not he, but her representatives. In other words, like with Dionysus, who was, how do I say it? Kind of son of the mother. There would be goddesses who, like these orgies that would take place, and the orgy was as a demonstration of their reverence and veneration of the Great Mother. There's also an acceptance of the lunar blood mysteries. The shedding of blood is a sacred act, an act of fertility and fruitfulness. Whether it be the blood of a wild beast, a domestic animal, or a man, the Great Mother is actually going to, as you can see in some of the mythology, she's actually going to kill this son lover in various forms. It's not always in this anthropomorphized forms. It may be in the form of a wild animal as well. Okay. Okay. And as we get into some of the goddesses, how they play off of one another in terms of this masculine energy. For example, there's Kali and Shiva, Sekhmet and Ra. These are goddesses of war, where the masculine god is balancing her martial aspect and sometimes even has to subdue her. But even when he subdues her, it's not for that long. So, interesting. Okay. So, once again, we have this negative fascination with the Great Mother, and it reaches a critical juncture in the psyche of this son, capital S. Right? There's a distinct psychic cleavage which drives the son to break free of this encircling Ouroboros. Okay, he's caught up in this, Great Mother, and now he wants to break free. But she has all power, right? Did she not have aggressive, destructive attributes, yea, masculine attributes? This leads to patriarchal gods and heroes who exist for the sole purpose of slaying and destroying the Great Mother. And this Great Mother, once again, who's going to take the form of either a giant, a serpent, a dragon, a whale, or some kind of monster. Okay, the hero has to come and kill it. And for the most part, that's how we see the rise of patriarchy. So we get the hero Gilgamesh, for example, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, who kills the sacred bull of heaven, Inanna's bull. Yahweh, who in the Hebrew myth separates the upper and lower waters, which later in the Hebrew Bible, they describe these waters with these negative, pejorative terms: the dark, the chaos, the deep, the abyss, the dark night. And they use the word Tehom, Tehom. It was probably a term borrowed from the Babylonian great mother, Tiamat, who displayed herself as night, truth, justice. Tiamat gave birth to all the gods, and then they rebelled against her, and she finally conquered this sun god Marduk, who slays her dragon whale body and uses the fragments to fashion the universe. There's also a similar story in Indian myth of Danu and her son Virta. And this is two Dravidian Typhonian serpent creators. Then the sky god Indra comes along and sees this pair. They're just kind of curled up in their little serpent, just chilling, as it were. And this sky god Indra comes and, lightning bolt and decapitates them and uses the fragments from this decapitated serpent to bring about creation. But creation was already there. I don't know. Okay. Other examples: Apollo slays Gaia's python, Perseus slays the Amazon Medusa, St. George slays the dragon in England, in terms of the Anglo-Saxon tradition, and St. Patrick drives the snakes out of Ireland. And I think it's in The Great Cosmic Mother where she kind of tongue-in-cheek says, there weren't even any snakes in Ireland. So I guess they wanted to make sure that women got the message that you're not having any of that goddess worship stuff here, Okay. So what do we learn from these solar god heroes who come and slay the mother? We learn the importance of serpentine power. We learn the importance of Shakti, Kundalini power. The fiery breath of the dragon is an actual power which, when roused into action, can as easily destroy as it can create. What is true of any natural power, be it fire, water, or wind, is also true of spiritual power. Great energy is great danger. And this is the kind of energy we need in these dark times. Yes, we do. We do. So, the Great Mother, in her aspect as life and death goddess, has to be repressed. Basically, I guess what I got from that is that the sun, there's a movie called Being There, and and I think at one point there's some graffiti on a wall that says, the white boy has a complex. I mean, the sun has a complex, and on the one side we have these negative symbols: deadly mother, great whore of Babylon, seductress, dragon, and witch. On the other side we have what? The mother, the virgin. And by now, virgin is not meaning not related to man. It's meaning sexual chastity by now. So on the one side we have Lilith, then we have Eve. We have Ereshkigal, and we have Inanna. We have Nephthys, we have Isis. We have Medusa and Athena. I have problems with that Athena. I don't see how she really kind of angers me sometimes. What she does, coming out of the forehead of Zeus. I mean, what's that about? But anyway, So from the image of the Great Mother as the good mother, the white goddess that Robert Graves talks about, this good mother is split off, and this all of a sudden is the only symbol that is seen as having any value. This is under patriarchy, obviously. The other part, this death goddess, the moon mother is devoured by the father/son solar hero, and is repressed, demonized, and retreats to the underworld, with the result being the depotentiation of the feminine. And I know when I first, started reading about this stuff, I guess I'll go back because I've been reading a lot. I know you guys probably don't like that, but when as Bobby has probably told you all too much about us, whatever, about our association, what my sister calls TMI, too much information. No, seriously, I think my first, conscious book was When God Was a Woman. I think that was my first book, and it just rocked my socks. So this is when I was in New York. I was actually substitute teaching, and then I got a fellowship to come down here to go to graduate school. So then I met Bobby, and this is when the whole Afrocentric thing was picking up. So, which was great, because I had a taste of it in college through the anti-apartheid stuff, Everybody was into that. So anyway, I get to Atlanta, and I had known Dr. Ben, because he used to be on Like It Is. Any New Yorkers here know Gil Noble's Like It Is. So I guess what I'm saying is, I got into the consciousness and everything. But when I would go to these lectures, I won't mention names, you know who they are. I always felt something missing, and inevitably, Bobby and I would leave, and we'd get into a massive argument. What are you doing? I don't want to hear about that white woman shit, And it used to hurt me so bad, and I felt like, I'm a bad black person if I'm not, looking at this feminine material. But like he said, you have to separate, the feminist movement from the feminine energy, which is what I think, which is where I was heading, But someone with such a strong personality as Bobby, it just was hard to do that, because he just, Okay, he has a lot of goddess energy. So, and I took the role of the sun, and I was trying to, fight him, So, in kind of a reversal there. So I guess the point I'm saying is, so I had to almost like I had to sneak and read this stuff or something, because he would, give me the verbal beat down if I wanted to bring it up, All I had to know about, Akhenaten and all these males, And then we get the nice little queen, Queen T or somebody, and that was it, And I knew there was more. I knew there was more because I lived more, I knew maybe before I could put a word on it that I was the dark goddess. Because I've gone through my life kind of, in this marginal area. And actually, this marginal area is an area of great power and potential. And I'm hoping by being here today that, this is a good sign of things to come for all of our people. So, okay, I forgot what I was really talking about. But. Oh, okay, I looked down. So one of the books I already talked about was, Mysteries of the Dark Moon by Demetra George. This, oh my goodness sakes, this is a powerhouse, folks. If you don't have it already, I'll be honest, I was actually going to a 12-step program. That's how I met my friend Valerie. We both had or have, problems with food. So the book, on the personal development tip, it was very helpful. But also in terms of the scholarship and an understanding of the precessional ages, the precession of the equinoxes, the 26,000-year cycles and stuff. And just, it's a powerhouse book. So Demetra George, And once again, I think you all have, gotten out of that, oh boy, another white woman, another black, not white woman, another white man. But I think Bobby has said, they've been entrusted with this stuff for whatever reason, while we kind of get ourselves back together. So I don't have any problem reading their work, their scholarship. I just know how to read between the lines for certain things. You have to be very conscious of that. So I'm, reading about the goddess and then putting that together with, the Dr. Ben piece and, all this Afrocentricity. And I'm like, if women were all that and if black women were all that and we were queens, what happened, So why aren't we all that now? But we are. I know that. But at the time, this book helped me realize the cycles. It helped me have an appreciation of the cyclical nature of the goddess. And I'm going to quote from her. The destruction of the goddess culture was a necessary prelude for her subsequent regeneration, and this process was built into her cosmology of death and rebirth. Because knowledge of cyclical renewal had diminished over the years, the violence, brutality, and chaos that did in fact occur were the reaction of people panicking as they passed through dark moon phase of the feminine cycle. For all of us who can, she puts herself in there, for all of us who carry the feminine principle, that's us though, right? We can be released from our attitudes of victimhood, okay? And that's a perfect example of, how the white woman will kind of insert her little agenda in there, Okay, and then she continues. As we reclaim the mystery teachings of the goddess and revision the patriarchal distortion of the dark, we accept that dissolution and decay are essential and necessary stages that prepare the way for renewal. Okay, but we're not only talking about renewal, we're talking about just a new creation. I think that's the energy that we all want to bring about. Okay. I'm going to skip some of those here. I'll just mention this. I'm not going to really talk about it because I didn't bring this book with me. I was trying to pack light, but that's not a good thing when you're at a conscious, But the name of the book, and I'm sure you've heard Bobby mention it, is Life's Daughter, Death's Bride by Kathy Carlson. Life's Daughter, Death's Bride, and it's it is the story of Demeter and Persephone. And once again, I read that kind of with a dual focus. On the one, I am interested in Jungian psychology and psychoanalysis, and on the other, I equate Demeter and Persephone as black people in the underworld, which is where we are all living. We're living in hell. So it's a very powerful myth when you look at it that way. Okay. So Kathy Carlson, she spells it Kathie, actually. And once again, it's important to read. A lot of these books on goddesses and gods are written by Jungian psychologists, and it's important because that's archetypal energy. And anytime you're dealing with archetypal energy, you're talking about first people's energy. You're talking about us. So don't let the little curly locks of some of the little Greek statues and stuff throw you off. That's you, and that's me. Well, yes, Storm. Mm-hmm. Okay, now let's look at some of the dark goddesses individually. Once again, the import of these dark goddesses is that they provide us with a profound intrapsychic material for self-analysis and development, and through their rites and mysteries, they offer us as a people a way out of this counterfeit existence. Okay, so starting with Medusa, okay, just to kind of give you, I think you already know about the serpent symbology. Okay, the first symbol we saw this afternoon was what? The Ouroboros, which is the self-begetting serpent, right? The serpent can be seen as a totem of the Great Mother. Okay, and as Neumann points out, the Great Mother, or Dark Goddess, possesses masculine but not paternal features. Okay, there's a difference. Therefore, by extension, the serpent is both her masculine phallic aspect and the serpent and her female aspect of, or a metaphor for the woman's womb, which has the power to shed its skin every month and to renew itself every month. That's sloughing off of the womb. Okay. This also parallels the moon cycles of full moon, new moon, dark moon, waxing and waning. All this is tied in together very nicely, actually. Serpents live in dark holes and crevices of the earth. Ancients believed their dark subterranean homes were located in the underworld. And that tells you right there that you're talking about a chthonic energy, right? And then obviously serpents and snakes are synonymous with the Kundalini and Shakti, or sexual energy. All right. So here we have Medusa. Is anybody here who doesn't know the story of Medusa? Anybody pretty much knows? You don't. Oh, you know how it ends. Okay. I actually shouldn't have asked that. Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to read then. Because, yeah. Put it on the tape. All right. Tape. All right. Well, there's a couple of variations, and once again, I'm reading from Demetra George's Mysteries of the Dark Moon, where we have these three Gorgon sisters who were beautiful golden sea goddesses, okay? You may have to cross out that word golden. But maybe golden in the sense that they were just illuminated and radiant, okay? The lovely maiden Medusa was pursued by many suitors. But apparently Poseidon, god of the underworld, was the only one that she would be with, okay? And apparently Poseidon takes the form of a horse and seduces Medusa and makes love with her. Now, okay, so sounds like bestiality, but once again, when you're talking in the myth realm, it's something that maybe our conscious, mundane, gross molecular structure, we can't conceptualize it, but yeah, allegory, exactly, thank you. All right, after Medusa makes love with Poseidon, now also the key point is where she decides to make love with him. She actually makes love with him in Athena's spot, in her sanctuary or something. Okay, so that, that's like, sleeping with your boyfriend and, okay. And she becomes pregnant with twins, and she incurs the wrath of Athena. Okay. Some say that Athena's anger was due to Medusa daring to compare her beauty to that of Athena. Athena may have resented Medusa's sexual encounter because she had renounced her own sexuality in order to maintain her exalted status on Mount Olympus. In other words, I'm the goody two-shoe girl. I'm the So that's what that energy is about. Okay, whether Athena's rage came from the desecration of her temple, sexual jealousy, or competition for supremacy in Libya, she transformed Medusa and her sister into these ugly hags. Okay. Medusa was singled out as the most terrifying of the three, and her face was made so hideous that a glimpse of it would turn men to stone. Tales embellished with danger spread far and wide, telling how the lands and cavern of these fearsome sea monsters abounded with the rigid shapes of petrified men and animals. The Gorgons were feared for their deadly power. Hence, the death of Medusa became a worthy, heroic quest for the patriarchal solar hero. So that's how we're setting up Perseus coming to the scene. Okay, the tale of Perseus' slaying of Medusa. Perseus is the son of Zeus, and but Zeus kind of, entrusts Perseus, he's going to have his boyhood with his mother, who is Danae, D-A-N-A-E. And so Zeus is not around. He's like an absentee father or something. And the king, warned by an oracle that the only child of his daughter would kill him, had Danae and her infant placed in a great chest and cast adrift in the sea. Sounds familiar? Zeus saw that they floated safely to the island of Seriphus and were rescued by kindly fisherman Dictys. Perseus grew to manhood there, following the fisherman's humble trade. Okay. In due time, Polydectes, cruel and ruthless leader of the land, lusted after Danae, Perseus' mother, and sought a way to get rid of this son, Okay, so trying to get rid of Perseus so he can get a rap with Danae or something. Okay. Polydectes' plan was to raise a tax of horses from the islanders, and because Perseus was poor, there was no way for him to obtain a horse. He was tricked into pledging that he would bring the king the head of the Gorgon with its deadly power. All right, so that's how Perseus goes and sneaks up on Medusa and eventually slays her.